Before the Eisenstern rose, there were small communities scattered across a fractured earth. When the sky lanes closed and trade convoys were cut off, those communities turned inward. They preserved songs about storms and harvests, and they taught their children to read the stars as if they were constellations of ancestors. When the call came to build a ship that could carry more than cargo, they answered with the only thing they had left: craft. The hull was forged in a cathedral of cranes. Each plate was hammered to a rhythm that matched a folk drumbeat. Guildsmen signed their work with tiny emblems: a mill wheel, a steeple, a stag. The engine cores were tuned not only for thrust but for tone, so that when the Eisenstern moved, it sang a low, comforting chord. Before launch, the crew walked the length of the ship barefoot, leaving footprints and whispered blessings. They lit a single candle in the bridge and called the ship by name. Their first voyages were small and stubborn. They ferried medicine to domed towns and rescued children from orbital storms. Word spread that the Eisenstern did not behave like other ships. It arrived at dawn, its hull glinting like a bier, and left with the quiet of a procession. The crew kept to old customs. They held a midday pause to share bread. They read aloud the names of those who had died on previous runs. These rituals became their navigation, a moral compass that guided decisions in the cold calculus of space. A corporate armada, sleek and efficient, claimed a corridor the Eisenstern needed. The armada offered contracts and licenses, but the corridors were priced in ways that would hollow out the small towns the Eisenstern served. The armada's captain spoke of profit and optimization. The Eisenstern's crew spoke of oaths and the right to bring light to places the market had abandoned. Negotiations failed. The armada blockaded a supply node. The Eisenstern could have retreated, but retreat was not a tradition they honored. Instead, they prepared a different kind of engagement. They would not outgun the armada. They would outlast it and outweave it. Matthias drew plans that looked like illuminated manuscripts. He combined old siegecraft with modern stealth. The crew disguised the Eisenstern as a relic convoy, festooning its hull with banners and false cargo. They used festival fireworks as decoys and the ship's tonal engines to mimic the acoustic signature of a harmless freighter. At night, they sang to keep their hands steady. The armada, trained to read numbers and signatures, misread the Eisenstern as a non-threat and relaxed its guard. When the blockade tightened, the Eisenstern slipped through a narrow gap in the patrol pattern. The armada realized the deception and struck. Metal screamed, the bridge filled with smoke and the smell of burnt spruce. The crew fought not only with lasers and shields, but with improvisation. Healer in Martyr moved through the chaos like a midwife of fate, binding wounds and whispering names. The ship's choir, a ragged group of engineers and musicians, sang a hymn that vibrated through the hull and steadied the hands of the gunners. In the end, the Eisenstern did not destroy the armada. It did something more dangerous. It forced the armada to witness the cost of its blockade. The crew broadcast images of starving towns, of children learning to read by candlelight, of harvests lost to corporate tariffs. The armada's captains, who had never seen the faces behind the numbers, found their consoles cluttered with songs and stories. For a moment, the calculus faltered. Calculus. Victory required a price. To break the blockade permanently, the Eisenstern had to perform a maneuver that would disable its own jump drives. The crew accepted the cost with the solemnity of a funeral. They held a last supper in the mess hall, passing bread and salt, reciting the names of those who would not return. Kapitän Annalisa wrote a final log entry on a scrap of oak and sealed it in the hull. The maneuver worked. The blockade collapsed. The armada withdrew, its captains shaken by the human faces they had been forced to see. The Eisenstern drifted, engines silent, a wounded monument in the dark. They towed the Eisenstern to a quiet moon and turned it into a beacon. The hull became a library and a shrine. Children came to learn both welding and song. The ship's tonal engines were repurposed to ring out on festival nights, a reminder that technology could be an instrument of culture rather than its erasure. Kapitän Annalisa walked the ship one last time and left her spruce needles in the bridge. She told the apprentices that tradition was not a chain, but a compass. The Eisenstern's story spread across the lanes. Other crews began to stitch their own rituals into their ships. Markets reopened, not as monopolies, but as networks of mutual aid. Years later, when the skylanes were busy again, travelers would point to a constellation and tell the story of the Eisenstern. They would hum a low chord that sounded like iron and pine. The tale became a new kind of tradition, a fusion of craft and starcraft, a reminder that the future could be built with hands that remembered how to make things that last. The Eisenstern remained, not as a warship or a relic, but as proof that a people who keep their songs and their oaths can steer the course of the stars.